What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and many tickers out there, what events are coming out that are going to affect how the market moves, what you should be watching for going into the later days of the trading week. Before I break down about all this information, though, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. Deposit $100 and you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $100 cash reward. The offer ends in 3 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So anyway, SPY is down 0.41% for the day. Tesla's down as well, and many tickers are in the red. But the question is, how will the market move going forward? Let's first talk about the data that's coming out. Tomorrow morning at about 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, we have the home price index or the house price index data coming out. We also have consumer confidence at about 10 o'clock a.m. And we also have new home sales coming out at the same time. And then at 10:30 a.m., we have the Dallas Fed Services Index being reported, which will affect how the market perceives the services index of the overall economy. So this is going to be very, very important. So watch all of this data basically between 9 o'clock a.m. and about 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Every 30 minutes, some data is coming out basically, and this will affect how the market moves. So just be ready for that. Now, on top of this, I just want to note that even though all this data is coming out, it's not as significant as a CPI report, but what's going to be more significant is going to be Jerome Powell, as he's going to be speaking at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. What Powell says will move the market, so just be ready for that. And what he says could cause more volatility. He has been more hawkish as of recent, so just be very careful on Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Then after that, we have Powell speaking again at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday morning. And then that's going to affect the market for Thursday. Then we have the GDP numbers coming out. We have initial jobless claims. We have some Fed speakers. And then for Friday, we have the PCE report and the Michigan Consumer Sentiment reports with inflationary expectations. So lots of data is coming up between Wednesday and Friday with Powell speaking included. And that's going to be important. For now, the market is going to be kind of like slow. Today was not a very volatile day except for like Tesla and a couple of others and like the NASDAQ. But just be prepared for all of this. It's going to be very significant. Last but not least, before I talk about the charts, let's look at this data. For Monday, we had Carnival that just came out, nothing too big. For tomorrow, we have Jefferies, Manchester United reporting earnings. For earnings, we have on Wednesday, General Mills and then Micron with BlackBerry. And then for Thursday, we have Rite Aid in the morning, followed by the one and only Nike. And that's going to be the biggest one for the week. Besides that, there's nothing major for earnings. But now let's talk about the charts. What are the charts telling us going forward? I'm going to try to go fast through this, try to make this video a little short. The reason for that is because I have something coming up in just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to try to finish this as fast as I can. Anyways, for SPY, there's a potential falling wedge you could argue is developing. I'm going to look at this maybe on... Maybe the daily chart might be able to show this. I'm going to double check if the daily can. I don't think the daily is that good. Maybe like the 4-hour time frame looks a little bit better. So you could basically draw out 2 trend lines and just talk about how this is looking like a falling wedge. But the problem with doing that, right? There's a problem. That does not guarantee a bounce, first off. And secondly, there's no signal of a potential bounce. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you draw out a falling wedge that looks like this, for instance, maybe you could draw it out just like this. The problem with this is there's no true sign of this thing breaking out to the upside just yet. No signal of it, so I don't think it's smart to assume it's going to happen immediately. And there's also no guarantee that these always play out, right? No guarantees. We just have to be patient and just very, very careful. If you look at the falling wedge that looks like this, I mean, it could take many days before this actually does break out. It could take even longer. So I'd be very careful with this. There's also not a guarantee, so wait for confirmation of a breakout just to turn more bullish. But like I said, I would just be very careful, if anything. Now, I'm going to close this up and now talk about what the technicals are currently telling us. And that is, if you look at the 4-hour time frame on SPY, it's looking weak so far. It is trying to base around this 430 area, so it is possible this thing tries to bounce in the morning and starts selling off a little bit more. Then we're going to see if this thing could base. Major support right now is going to be between 429 to 430. Watch that area very carefully. If 429 breaks, it's going to sink a lot lower. It could try to bounce off like 430 though. So watch it all very carefully. We could see a lot of buyers step in and lots of them try to essentially defend their positions. We'll see if the buyers step in, but it also depends on the news. Now, if the market tries to pump to the upside, watch 432 as resistance. If it breaks above that, there's 432.25. Then after that comes the 433 area. So there's not a whole lot of resistance until about the 433s. So I'd be watching 433.8 as the next major level. There is some resistance at like 433.3 around that area, but more importantly, it's going to be 433.8, then 433.94. Get above that, there's 435, and then after that, we could see this thing pumps about 436 for the gap fill right over here. There's this unfilled gap. If it gets above 435, it's going to push for 436.25 to 436.64. So we're going to be watching these very carefully to see if the market could get a small bounce. We're not seeing signs of it just yet. And if anything, we have to watch support just to be safe, this entire 430 area. Now, once again, it is looking a little bit more bearish, so the market may sell off a little bit. Maybe it gaps up first and then sells off a little bit more, but then we're going to see if this thing could bounce or not. If it breaks down, it could turn a lot more bearish. If it breaks below 429 to 430, if not, if it holds it, it could still try to hold these levels and maybe bounce a little bit. Now, for Tesla, I'm going to be watching this very carefully. I mean, on the 1 hour time frame, Tesla's been just continuing to sell off. But if you look at like the 4 hour time frame, let me just pull up the 4 hour chart. Well, on the daily chart, first off, before I talk about the 4 hour, sorry about that, guys. On the daily chart, we have this crossover on the PPO right over here, which is looking a little bit more bearish. And then on the 4 hour time frame, I want to transition to this. This is looking more bearish as well on the PPO, on the MACD. And then we have this head and shoulders formation that's developed. Tesla's continuing to sell off in the after hours, but remember, we have that gap now. If it ends up opening or if it ends up like dropping below $240 tomorrow, it's going to come down to about 235. And if that fails us, it could drop even lower. It's about 230. If 230 fails us, Tesla's going to come all the way down to 222, which is where the bottom of the head and shoulders could be. And as I mentioned in my video from before, even if Tesla does sell off, okay, it's not the end of the world. Not the end of the world whatsoever, because I believe Tesla's going to bounce by Thursday or Friday, get a very big bounce as we approach deliveries. Deliveries are going to be coming out during the weekend, so just be ready for it. It's going to be big for Tesla. But for now, it is looking more bearish. It may try to get a bounce in the morning, retest like 245. It could reject off there and slowly downtrend moving forward. If it breaks above 245, watch this thing retest 250 to 251.74. If that breaks, it could make its way all the way up to about 255, followed by 258, and then 260 afterwards. So watch these levels carefully. They're all going to be very important. For GME, this thing is downtrending still. We're going to be watching how this thing responds to about this 22.8 level. If that fails us, watch 21 flat, and then we have 20 after that. If it tries to break to the upside, watch resistance at about 24. For now, though, it is below the 50 and the 200. Also, the 200 is at 23.14, some resistance there. So 23.14, then 24 are going to be resistance zones. It's looking more bearish, so just be very careful with it for the time being, and it may come down to the 22s very soon. AMD is looking a little bit like it wants to try basing around here. There's a potential bullish divergence forming, but there's no sign of a bounce just yet. Now, I also want to note that on the 1 hour time frame, I think it's the 1 hour, AMD has been getting rejection off the 50, so it's still looking weak. There's no true sign of a bounce. To turn bullish, it has to break above the previous level and make its way up to 110. If it turns bearish, it has to break below 107, and it could come down to 105. We're just going to have to wait and see on that. NIO is continuing to downtrend. There's this like glitch, I think, as of right now. I'll double check on that a little bit later. It's continuing to downtrend, basically. I believe that it's going to try to base around the low 8s, but eventually it's going to make its way down to 7.8. Then it might bounce with Tesla at the end of the week and potentially after deliveries. So just watch that carefully. For Netflix, this is once again looking a little bit weak on the 1 hour time frame and also on the 4 hour time frame. If Netflix breaks below 415, we're going to be watching this 410 area as support. And if that fails us, it's going to come down to about 404. If Netflix bounces off this area, watch 420, 423.08, 425.78, and 430 as resistance. Right now, we're kind of stuck. It is looking a little bit more bearish, so I could see a small bounce followed by more bearish price action. I'm going to be careful with it nonetheless. For the triple Q, I'm watching 357.5 as support. If it breaks below this, watch 355 to 354, which is where the gaps happen to be on this thing. If it bounces off 357.5, watch this thing pump to about 359, then 360. 361.75 is going to be the next major level, 362.3. And then after that comes 363, then, push up to 366, then 368. I'm not sure if this thing is about to bounce just yet, but it is looking more bearish as of right now on the 4 hour time frame. I do believe it's going to gap up maybe get very close to like 359, but I don't know if it's going to be a gap and go, or if it's going to gap up then just come back down to fill the gap. That depends on the news and what happens with the futures. So I'm just going to be very patient just to be safe. For the NASDAQ, this thing is still forming this head and shoulders, getting very close to the 50. We may test and get to the low 13,000s, which makes me very cautious with the triple Q. Could bounce and retest 13,445 and then end up just continuing to drop. 4-hour currently looks bearish. We'll have to wait and see on that. SPX may retest 4,300 and then try to bounce. It's a possibility, but not a guarantee. I mean, this is still looking more bearish, so I'm just going to wait on this. If it does come down, we'll see a lot of buyers defend 4,300. It's very close to it. It's only about $28 away. It's getting very close, so I'm going to watch it carefully. The VIX is telling me that there are two possibilities. If the VIX flies above the high it made at 14.43, it's going to fly for $15. And if the VIX pumps up like that, that's going to become a lot more bearish for the markets, or at least the market's going to be bearish causing this to happen. If the VIX ends up breaking down to fill this gap, if it breaks this low at like 13.8, it's going to come all the way down to about the 13.5 area. The market will likely end up pushing up a little bit because of this. I'm in the middle. It's kind of stuck in the middle, so I'm just going to have to wait and see. The SQQQ may come down to retest the 50. If it does do that, that could be the market essentially pushing up a bit, but then it may bounce and continue pumping afterwards. So maybe like a backtest and a push up. That's why I think the QQQ could bounce a little bit, then continue to drop possibly. There's a possible inverse head and shoulders here. It is looking a little bit more bullish. So if it keeps going, that could cause the market, or at least this could be because of the market dropping more. For Coinbase, and let me just mention the dollar is red, not really doing much. It's very flat, very manipulated. For Coinbase, if this thing breaks and holds 62, watch 64, then 66. If it breaks down, watch 60. If that fails, this 57.8 could come. We're kind of in the middle. We're just going to have to see how the market responds. It did make an attempt to break up, but it failed. If it breaks above 66, it's going to fly to the 70s, in my opinion. So it's kind of stuck right now. Watch support and resistance just to be safe. For Aapl, I'm not too sure what this is going to do. This is currently testing 185. I believe that it's going to, make an attempt to bounce off that and retest 186. But then I don't know if it's going to sink all the way back down to 185 and break below it, or if it's going to just try to hold it. It's very hard to tell because of how it's basing right now. Apple's not really following the market. Apple's just trying to hold up quite nicely. So as of right now, we could assume that it's going to try to hold 185, maybe bounce a little bit, but it could come down to retest it as the 4 hour is still looking bearish. So I'm not too sure. If it does break 185, it could come all the way down to 184.31, then potentially the 182s. But Aapl has some strength. It's not really tanking like many other stocks so far. So watch support and resistance very carefully. Nvda, if this thing breaks below 400 as it's looking more bearish, watch 395, 392, 390, followed by the 386 area. If it bounces, watch resistance at 411, 416, and 421. The 4 hours looking more bearish, so watch this very carefully. And we're going to just have to wait and see on that. Google's looking more bearish as well. I mean, the 2 hour time frame is, once again, it's below the 200 EMA on either the 2 hour or also the 4 hour time frames. This is once again looking a little bit more bearish. There's a possible head and shoulders formation, and it is slowing down. If it holds below the 200, it's going to come down to about 117 and potentially 115. If it gets its way back above, this is going to act as support. If it gets above this 119.25 area, then we're going to be watching 120 as resistance and then 122.84. So I'm once again in the middle with this, but I am leaning a little bit more bearish. So I'm very close to the middle, but a little bit more bearish because of the fact that it's below the 200. If it maintains this, it's going to turn more bearish. It's going to make an attempt to break above it though, but there's no guarantee it's going to hold. So that's why I'm still in the middle and a little bit more bearish, leaning on Google. So I'm going to watch that carefully. For Amazon, this got a bearish cross. It's going to likely test the 50. I don't know if Amazon's going to bounce off 26.71 or not. If it does bounce off this, it could push back to 130. Depends on the news. If it breaks below 126.7, it's going to come all the way down to 125 and potentially 123.85. I'm in the middle with Amazon. We just have to wait and see what it does with the 50 EMA test on the 4 hour time frame. And the same thing could be said about Meta. It is above the 50 now. If it breaks below the 50, it's going to come down to about 276 to potentially 270, then 269 in my opinion. If it bounces off this, it could make its way all the way up to about 182-ish, around that zone. 185, 187.5, then potentially, did I say 1? I'm sorry, I meant 2, guys. Sorry about that, guys. I'm so sorry about that. Basically, if it breaks down below the 50, it's going to retest 276. If that fails us, watch 275, then potentially these lower levels like at 272, 270, then 269. If it pushes up, okay, watch 282, that entire zone right there, 285, 287.5, potentially 290. All right, so those are some zones to watch for on Meta. If it holds above the 50, it could try to push up to the mid 280s. If it breaks below the 50, it's currently testing and it's kind of stuck and chopping around it. If it breaks below it, it's going to come down quite hard. So watch it carefully. Be very, very cautious. All right, guys. So with that said, my play of the week is going to be Tesla because I think Tesla has more potential downside, still looking weak, but it may get a very beautiful bounce near the end of the week thanks to some very, very awesome anticipation of Tesla's moves, anticipation of what Tesla's doing with their deliveries and many things like that. So it's going to be my favorite play. Watch that very carefully. And with that said, watch support and resistance and get ready for tomorrow. I'll see you guys in the pre-market. The market to the moon is the long term is very bright, and peace out.